Well, thank you for all coming out this rainy morning, braving the weather to come out to the May meeting of the Livonia Republican Club. I'm Dylan Green, the president of the club. We're honored to have a guest speaker, Kristine Bonds, candidate for Congress here today. Dr. Joseph Guzman was also scheduled to speak here. He was a candidate for Secretary of State from the Lansing area. Unfortunately, we have not heard from Dr. Guzman why he's not here.
I think his boat is anchored at the dock.
So, at this point, we'll just give the microphone over to Kristine, let her introduce herself, tell us about why she's running, give her some of the backstory. So, Kristine, to you.
Well, thank you.
Over to you.
Excellent. It's actually my honor to be here. And thank you for all coming out today. And I really want to thank John Pastor for helping arrange this from the bottom of my heart. I'm Kristine Bonds, and I am running for Congress in the 11th District. And if it's okay with all of you, I'll share some of my background. But quite frankly, what's most important to me is knowing what's most important to you. So I want to keep this very conversational, and just let me know when time's running out, and I'm happy to pass the mic around.
Time's running out when you stop talking.
Okay.
You got all of it?
Okay, great. So I was born and raised in Detroit, in West Bloomfield, and I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I had a very loving home, and I had a father and mother who really allowed me to be myself. And what I mean by that is I was taught to be honest. I was taught to have honest dialogue. I was taught to believe in what feels right for me. And I've seen a lot of change growing up here. I'm 53 years old, and our district has changed tremendously. There's been a lot of good, but there are also many, many challenges. And as a taxpayer, I am so frustrated. To name a few items, the roads are ridiculous, seriously. I'm concerned about education. I'm concerned about the safety in schools. I'm concerned about the worst opioid epidemic that our nation is experiencing. I'm concerned about raising auto insurance rates. These are items that keep me up at night. I'm concerned about securing our border. And as an outsider, I feel that I don't owe anyone anything, quite frankly. If you choose to support me, it's going to be because our values align with each other's values. And let me give a couple of examples of how I put into motion action steps that make a difference. Quite frankly, being a Republican doesn't necessarily mean that everyone still is on the same page. I'm pro-life, and let me share a story surrounding that. This last year, there was a young woman who we knew, and when I say we, I married my high school sweetheart, but anyways, my spouse has been quite supportive, but we know a young woman who was pregnant, and she was in very dire circumstances. She didn't have money coming in, and she was really in a crisis situation, and she was thinking about not carrying her baby full term. So my husband and I talked it over, and we decided to allow her to come live with us until we could make sure that she had the resources available to her emotionally, physically, as well as financially to make a sound decision. And she changed her mind. She decided to have this child. And that's one example of, it was such an amazing experience for me and for my husband, because it is truly about helping people in our community. It's extending the love that we have from our family to neighbors, and to sometimes strangers. And so it is then that I really started to think, how could I help people on a bigger scope? And that is one of the reasons why I decided, like, running for this position made perfect sense to me. Another example is, and this is pretty close to home, but my stepson, his name is Drew, a week before his 25th birthday, he unfortunately fatally overdosed, and it was due to opioid drugs. And, you know, going through the healing process and really what we experienced as a family, that not just the loss of our beloved son, but the sense of, you know, loneliness, sometimes despair, because I felt that the resources were just not available to us in terms of really understanding the scope of what that kind of loss brings into a family. And, you know, at some point you have to take the emotions out of it to be productive, and that's what I've done. And I do feel that we are experiencing the worst epidemic our nation has seen. You know, it's killed more people than the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. It killed 65,000 young men and women last year. Our life expectancy in America has lessened for the second year in a row due to this epidemic. And here's the problem. The state will receive grants from the federal folks, and on a local and state level, we will not get the funds that we're supposed to get. I met with Sheriff Bouchard a couple days ago, and this is just an example of the disconnect between the state reps in Lansing, you guys, and the folks in Washington, D.C. A grant comes in to the state, $500,000 grant. Our community received $19,000. And that is the problem. If we don't have a real champion going to Washington, D.C., making sure that we protect our families, our children, our grandchildren, our aunts and uncles, our grandparents, this epidemic will not end. I believe we need a Marshall Plan. So my first step was I went to Washington this past January. I sat down with Paul Ryan's team. I had to, because I was running for Congress, and I told this story about, you know, losing our son, the lack of resources, where's the money? Fortunately, they took it very seriously. They added it to the State of the Union address that President Trump had, and the opioid epidemic was included as a line item. So now we have $6 billion that has been allocated to fight this epidemic for the next 2 years. It'll be split. However, the problem is, who's really going to champion our district to make sure that the money that comes in from the federal level comes not only to the state level, but into our communities? And so it's these kinds of situations that propel me to run for office. And I think that's important, because there is no other agenda except wanting to be the voice for your families in Congress, because my voice hasn't been heard in Congress. I think there's been a huge shift from the legislative power to the executive power, which is not right. The folks today in Congress are not taking care of us. We see it in our roads. We see it in the schools. We see it in the lack of opportunity for jobs in our district. I mean, we are home to the industrial military complex area. I mean, and at the end of the day, we're still fighting to find jobs that support families. And we're at a time where we're still very connected to the automotive companies, GM, Fiat, Chrysler, and Ford. And for the first time in history, we're no longer manufacturing the most cars. The imports are. Now, that's good for our nation because the imports are doing great, but what does that mean for us in our communities for this district. It means that we have to make sure that we align what's best for our domestic OEMs, the domestic car companies, and the technology that's going to absolutely lead the automotive sector moving forward. There's no question about it. So for the last 10 years, I've been in bed with the OEMs. That's what I've done. I've brought the most genius technological companies into Detroit to help GM, Fiat, Chrysler, and Ford remain on top of their game, to ensure they retain their market share, to help them steal market share from the imports. And this is another critical time that we have to make sure that there is a vision in place for the next 5, 7, 10 years, so that we are not just getting by, but flourishing as a district. And these are the types of problems that truly keep me up at night. There's no question about it. So at the end of the day, it's truly one-on-one experience. This is the most favorite thing I get to do, is come to these kinds of dialogues, come to the table and share what truly keeps me up at night, and to hear what is most important to you. And it again ties back into, we're the taxpayers. We're the ones footing the bill for everything. And yet, we are not receiving back what is truly rightfully ours. And that's a safe community, that is schools that the children are truly being taken care of in terms of learning, and they feel safe. That's being able to drive on roads that, I blew out 2 tires this last winter. I have friends who are, it's expensive. There's a disconnect. Lansing has let us down. And so the person that you end up voting for is someone that's truly going to have to start working on bonding and rapport with not only the folks in Lansing, but certainly making sure that they're always on the ground. They're always listening to what is most important to you and your families, and bringing that back to Washington to make sure that our voices are heard. Does that make sense? Okay. So having said all that, are there any questions? Are there any burning desires?
Question? Mrs. Mons, thanks for coming out to Livonia. It means a lot to us. My name is Rob Donovic. Currently, I serve in the military, and one of my major issues from my U.S. rep is, what is your take on intervention, military intervention in other countries? It seems like for so long we're always intervening in other countries' issues. I understand that we have to make sure that we are taking care of our needs across the world, but at the same time, is it always the best choice for Americans for us to intervene in other countries and spend so much tax dollars? And also, what is your take on military spending? So I guess it's the same question in a sense, but we spend a lot of money in the military, we need the money, but at the same time, one is too much. One is too much intervening in other countries' issues. Thank you.
Great questions. So I think war should absolutely always be our last resort, no question about it. Having said that, I do feel that America is absolutely still the greatest country to live in, absolutely. However, and what that means also is that we do have to be the ones that set the stage in terms of doing what's right. We are not in a good place right now in terms of our military and so forth. The Army's down, the U.S. Navy is in bad shape. There's a lot of things that have gone unnoticed in the last administration, and I think that we're today in a place where at least we have the attention of President Trump, and that he is paying close attention to what needs to be done. And we're starting to see that in terms of the recent omnibus bill that was passed. I do feel that it is absolutely a priority to always maintain the sharpest, army in the world. And even though we need to strengthen it up, we're still the most powerful, army in the world, and it is something to be very, very proud of. But I do feel that we should never go to war until it's absolutely necessary. I do support the position that we've taken with Syria. I do think that it's a good thing to have folks, on the ground ready to relay back the information that needs to be relayed back in case it escalates. But there's no question that there should also be a limit to what is spent on the military. And that really brings up, it's devastating in terms of the passage of the omnibus bill. It's four people truly made that decision. And it wasn't the legislative branch. It was Pelosi, it was Schumer, it was Ryan, and it was McConnell. And no one read the bill. No one in Congress read it, and no one in the Senate read it. 2,200 pages, that's because they didn't give them time to do that. That is unacceptable. That is our job. That is our job. So now we have this 1.3 trillion, bill is passed, and that's on us, folks. It's going to be our money. And that is another example of it truly is scary to think about the lack of leadership that currently resides in Congress and in the Senate. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
The opioid crisis that you're talking about? I'm just wondering, and I know you can't do anything without the money, but what is your solutions for controlling people getting access to drugs and stopping this crisis? What solutions do you have?
So I believe there has to be a market plan, and I talked to Sheriff Bouchard about this, and I think it begins with education, creating an awareness plan, because I still think there's a really big stigma on addiction, and it truly is not as harsh as it sounds, guys. It isn't about the addict. It is about prevention. It is about those of us who, if we're not told it's one and done, which is the reality now with opioids, then the crisis is going to continue and grow. So it does start with a mass awareness play of letting folks know the facts about this. And we've begun to see that. I mean, we really have. It's like you can't really go through a day without hearing about it and so forth. But we have to have a very clear message to anyone, 7th grade on up, going to school. I think it has to be incorporated into education, into the curriculum, that this is the truth about these kinds of drugs, and this is what can happen if you use it one time. And what's very scary is that the two primary reasons why young adults start using opioid drugs, and these are prescription drugs, is due to sports injuries and oral surgeries. And I heard a story. This gentleman, his daughter, she goes to school in Birmingham. 3 of her classmates who ran track with her OD'd this last year because they started taking these prescription drugs due to sports injury. In many cases, doctors will, prescribe you 100 pills for, a sprained ankle or a knee injury, and it starts there when truly, and I've talked to doctors about this, if they had just been given an ibuprofen, they would have been okay. And it's also, I think, the role of the parents. I'm astounded by how many parents are not aware of what's going on and how easy it is to get access to prescription pills. And then, of course, securing our borders. I mean, that's the first step. From my point of view, there's the supply side and there's the demand side, and we have to pay attention to the demand The demand side is the folks who are taking the drugs, who have access to the drugs, no matter what community or suburb we live in. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Well, part of it, I guess if you talk to anybody who works in the ER, the people that come in that want those drugs know what they need to do and say to get them. And their hands are tied in the hospital because of laws that they have to meet their pain needs. And I'm just wondering how you can address that problem.
Clarify, how do you mean their hands are tied? Whose hands? The doctor's hands are
Well,
tied?
they give you their pain levels at such a level, they have to prescribe.
I know.
They can't prove it's at that level or not. And then these pills go out into the community.
Yeah, I know. But there are some actions that are being incorporated into the system relative to the doctor side of the equation. And that does start with now. And this is one of the things that Sheriff Bouchard helped put into place is that let's say you have someone who comes in to a hospital and they're saying, I'm in raging pain, and they do get a prescription, and then 15 minutes later they're at another pharmacy getting a prescription. They have now real-time reporting that allows them to look up to say, hey, this guy just got a prescription from this pharmacy 15 minutes ago, so we're not going to give them this prescription. Do you know how long it took to get that access to that kind of information, which is now legal to get? 2 years. It took 2 years to get that kind of action put into place. And so that's another barrier in terms of the lack of real-time capabilities in order to very quickly pass something. And so that also needs to be addressed. And unless you're on the ground understanding this and hearing all the different sides of the conversations, we're going to lose a lot more people.
Can I respond to Kristine? You know, part of the problem with this is where they're getting these drugs from. You know, they're going to their parents' cabinets, grandparents' cabinets. That's where it's starting from. After that injury that Kristine mentioned, they're going to see where's their bottle of Vicodin. Their friends are asking them, hey, go look in your grandparents' cabinets. Do they have any Vicodin lying around? And that's where it's starting from. After that injury, they're getting addicted. And then they need more, and then they need more. And once the Vicodin runs out, then they're looking to heroin. Heroin's a cheap substitute. And that's how it's getting really bad, because it's happening very quickly. And we have to dispose of these prescription medicines that are sitting in our cabinets. You know, everybody's gone to the dentist and they give you 30 Vicodin to get you through it. Most people don't use any, and if you might use 1 or 2. So we have to dispose, as the responsible adults, prescription drugs that are sitting around in our house. That's the first line of defense that we have now, is to get rid of the prescription drugs. This is a huge, huge problem that we need to address.
Mm-hmm. And they have drop-off locations now for prescription
Yellow
drugs.
containers.
Mm-hmm, yeah, so, that is another very important point. And it's every day that goes by, every 12 and a half minutes, someone ODs from an opioid-related situation. So time is of the essence.
I have a question. On the topic of narcotics, what is your stance, if it went to the federal level, to Congress on voting for the legalization of recreational marijuana?
I wouldn't support it. I don't support it. And quite frankly, I think it should remain at the state level in terms of legalizing marijuana. I mean, another stat that Sheriff Bouchard brought up to me was like, we see that, a lot of times it starts with marijuana and then they move to bigger, more serious drugs. And this, of course, doesn't include the people that have chronic pain that truly need sufficient, pain management care. Of course, we should take care of them. It's real. I mean, they're in pain every single day. People who have terrible back problems and so forth. I mean, I have a friend that needs to be on some kind of pain management care. Yeah, I don't support
it's on a different subject here, but there's been a rash of school shootings over the last short while, and the last one at Parkland. And what is your possible solution that you would have to help prevent that?
I am a huge defender of our Second Amendment. And I don't think that, any new laws would have any effect.
What could be done about it, though?
A lot can be done. I mean, I think that there is a connection between folks who are suffering from some types of mental illnesses that have access to guns. I also think, again, that, if we look at what happened, the federal agencies, again, let us down. They were warned 39 times that this young man had serious problems. The day of, there were supposedly, and we're still waiting for the concrete information, 4 sheriffs that were there, one of whom did nothing. Now, I'm not sure if it was his fault, I'm not sure if it was his supervisor's fault, but obviously there was a reason why he did not go into the building when he did have a gun, and he could have used that gun on the perpetrator. So there's a disconnect again between the federal agencies and our real life situations. There's that disconnect again. So until we know more, we have to begin to seriously consider taking away guns from those who are afflicted with mental illness and conditions that make them act that way. And also being responsible as parents, again, in the household, if you have a gun, make sure that it's locked up and you're the only one who has a key to it. Period.
Jim, I believe this is a local problem. We have to look at it for our children here. Kristine mentioned the officer that was on site in Parkland. Didn't go in.
Yep.
He was probably a little older, and that's a tough thing to do. Police officers aren't infallible, and they have families too. But now, another example of a gentleman in Maryland who was trained as a SWAT officer. He went in, shot 2 individuals, and stopped it from getting worse. We need to give our resource officers, for one, a gun, make sure they're armed to go into a school. It's a local issue that we have to work with our school boards and the state school board of education to make sure we have the properly trained resource officers to go in. It can't just be a security guard. It has to be somebody who has the ability and willingness to go in and protect our students.
Yeah, but they're making it a national issue though too. Want to ban all AR type 15s from the country.
Well, those are ridiculous.
I know, but it's being made a national issue though.
But let's make it a local one and actually get something accomplished.
Yeah.
And again, to fund those officers takes money, and in a conversation with Sheriff Bouchard, who's like, Kristine, I'm so strapped in terms of funding, and he absolutely supports having an officer in a school.
It gets down to prioritizing how you're spending your money.
That's right, that's absolutely right.
I'm sure that there's not a Republican in the country that's running that's not pro-life. Myself, my biological mom was a homeless runaway teenager. 1965, the law protected my life. I have friends, a very close friend, who was conceived through rape. And I know of an acquaintance who was also conceived through rape. And I'm curious of where on the scale of protecting life do you stand?
Conception begins with conception. There is no greater gift than our human life. There is no greater gift. 2 separate issues in my mind. 2 separate issues, rape and, for me, it begins with conception, and let's deal with the tragedy of the rape. But perception.
And then I wanna commend you on your stance on the opioid issue, and please, no matter what happens on August 7th, be out there, be vocal, and
Yeah.
all of us come together to help you, whatever, so we can try to eradicate this scourge. I was curious though, when you're around talking to people, and I know you've been to DC talking about it and such, has there ever been any talk about holistic approaches to pain management? Because the lobbyist for prescription pills is so powerful. And obviously there's no lobbyists for holistic approaches. Has there ever been any, have you heard of holistic approaches that maybe would work?
Yeah, believe it or not, some doctors support a more holistic approach, depending on what kind of doctor you see and so forth. And I think that the younger doctors that are just graduating have a much more open-minded approach. In fact, our other son went to Michigan State. He's a DO doctor, and he has a much more holistic approach to treating illnesses and so forth. The good news here, though, is that President Trump really supports fixing this issue and this epidemic, and so does his wife, Melania. She recently announced her Be Best campaign, and the opioid epidemic is one of her points of reference. And so I do feel that we're going to start to see a transition in terms of, again, it starts with the awareness, it starts with the education, and really bringing home like the reality and the facts and how many lives we lose every single day. And fighting the pharmaceutical giants is something that is going to take, again, a Marshall Plan, quite frankly. But where there's a will, there's a way. And does that answer your question?
I have a question about the education for the drug use. Almost all these kids, well, I think all, I don't know at what age started to go through the DARE program. The DARE program, about 6th grade, and the whole semester of anti-drug things coming and talking and stuff. And so what other kind of education would we use to, I feel like some of these kids are already addicted from their original pain thing, so it's hard. But would it just be like every grade? And every grade, what would we do to discourage them? Because that's a pretty big program.
I know. I mean, quite frankly, like from a grassroots perspective, it's truly setting up school assemblies one by one and getting the word out there. And we kind of want to make it sexy, like we want to bring in some rock stars. We're in several conversations in terms of bringing in folks who we know these kids adore, and hearing it from them, doing fundraising through a rock concert and saying, hey, you know what, let's take this oath together. We're in the process of setting up an organization, a nonprofit organization that it's called the Opioid Oath, and it's like, I vow to never try, so I will never die from opioids, so help me God. And I think that there is some strength in that in terms of kids, having fun at an event with someone that they admire who, has a #1 hit on the radio, and then again, seeing that their friends are doing it, and birds of a feather flock together. It's really gonna be one person at a time, one child at a time, and it's not gonna happen overnight, but. I think that bringing some kind of fun element to it, for lack of another word, will make a meaningful difference.
Well, I have a little different opinion. I don't think the school should be involved in that process at all. This is a parenting issue, and I believe it is a faith-based issue. If you have a belief in God, and let that process work, because parents need to do the teaching of that. The school system has to educate our kids in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Start at home with the parenting, let them do the teaching, and with the faith in God and the faith-based organizations, they should be emphasizing in the necessities of life.
On that, I'd like to add, my son graduated here from the Stevenson School District, or the Livonia Schools from Stevenson. When he was in 6th grade, and right after, well, probably 9th, 10th grade, he came to me and said, "Dad, you don't understand how much we learned about drugs we never heard of in school from DARE." And he said that some of his friends were actually introduced to drugs through the DARE program.
That's part of why DARE is no longer around.
You dare to say. Couldn't help it.
Couldn't keep the whole meeting down.
It's close.
Was there any other questions for Kristine? Kristine, thank you for coming out.
Sure, please visit my site, bondsforcongress.com, and I also have cards here. Thank you so much.
Kristine,
again.
let me ask you a question. It seems like small government conservatives have been lost in the last 10 years or longer, actually, since W, right? We have $21 trillion in debt right now. It seems to go up $1 trillion a year. What are we going to do about that, especially if interest rates start going up, which they have been? It's going to overwhelm our budget. All of a sudden, you know, a larger government means less liberty for everybody. So it's going to be a big issue over the next, 2 to 10 years, if not now.
We're bankrupt if we keep doing what we're doing. And Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid take up 66% of the annual federal budget today. That will continue to escalate. That's the fact. I think that, again, you know what's so alarming is that Congress does not annually look at the budgets for Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. It's not even on their radar. The president does not know how much is spent every single year on welfare. It's not a line item for his annual budget. How can that be? It's like forgetting to put your mortgage payment on one of your line items for your monthly expenditures. It's unbelievable in terms of the lack of responsibility that's taken place. And now we hear, especially we have the Congress, we have the Senate, and now we hear the Congress saying, oh, we can't get anything passed through. Once it goes to Senate, it's going to be filibustered. Really? Well, then let's take a step back and look at what is common ground so that we know for sure what we can pass. I think that tax reform is a good start, but it has to be forever. I mean, let's get rid of the individual tax, the small business tax, and repealing that. Obamacare. I mean, we no longer have to worry about the mandate, but I mean, it's costing us millions of dollars in terms of Medicaid, and it's just going to, we will absolutely, I mean, that truly is what keeps me up at night in terms of the constant flow of money that is not there and that's already been promised to us. I mean, I'm a baby boomer. It's like I've been paying into the system since I was 16 years old, and I'm not even sure it's going to be around for me. I think we need to privatize Social Security. I think that, welfare, there needs to be more of a concentration towards a work activation program. I think for Social Security in terms of disability, I think that's become something that people rely on for like early retirement and so forth. There has to be a stronger regulation towards allowing people to even get on it. Even as taxpayers, from kindergarten through 12th grade, each of us is paying $156,000 for each kid from kindergarten through 12th grade. And that is another area where I feel the government needs to get out of it. It needs to come back to the state and local levels. We have leaders that should be taking on that responsibility. And there are so many new ways that we can look at things in terms of, that's one of the things that technology has allowed us to do as people is to look to new ways to educate our children and so forth. There are some states that are participating in programs that allow them to privatize the money that comes from the state so that they can choose how they are going to educate their children. Is it through online courses? Is it through hiring, tutors? Is it homeschooling kids? And again, this is another way that we can ensure that our tax dollars are not being wasted. But in terms of the legacy programs that exist, they will absolutely bankrupt us if we don't pay attention to it.
To follow up on that, there's a lot of people talking about redundancy in agencies. I know the governor of Texas famously forgot a couple in one of his debates. Is there any agencies at the federal level that you think are redundant because we have them at the state, local, and county levels?
Education. I don't think we need the government in education. I certainly don't think we need the government in our healthcare either. They're not good at it. They can barely fix our roads. Like seriously, they need to get out of it.
I have a question. In regards to healthcare, it's safe to assume that we're all fans of capitalism here, so competition is always best. Do you support competition amongst healthcare? I mean, in the 2016 presidential election, the topic was getting rid of the state lines, right? The lines around the states. That's what President Trump consistently talked about. Is there any ideas that you have to kind of encourage more competition in healthcare so that maybe these healthcare costs can lower?
I mean, I think that it needs to be subsidized by private organizations. And I do think that the free market solves a lot of issues. I really do. I think that insurance companies, the very few that do great are rewarded unnecessarily. And I think that actually, if we were able to extend the state lines and make it a free market, we would see a tremendous difference in terms of rising healthcare costs. Absolutely.
Kind of maybe one, your Social Security you're talking about here, it's going to be a problem. I'm a few years away from it. A lot of people in the room are already collecting it here. What can we do to maybe possibly save the system? Do we get to increase the taxes for Social Security? Do we look at eligibility, retirement age? What's your thoughts?
If we don't change what we're doing, millennials will never see a dime in terms of Social Security. I think that we should get rid of the payroll tax, and I think that we should allow folks to save their own money and decide what their retirement's going to look like themselves, and then perhaps have a flat rate. Like when you reach age 55, then there's a flat rate. But there's no way that we're going to be able to continue to support the folks on Social Security, like we do today for the folks who are the millennials. It's just not going to happen. But the folks who are on it today should absolutely be taken care of. There's no question about it. You've been paying into it for your whole life.
I think unfunded liabilities are something like $114 trillion right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's astounding. The numbers are astounding.
Yeah, we talk about the $21 trillion deficit. We're not even talking about unfunded liabilities and what that number is. So.
Question that I have, Kristine, is you are also a resident of Michigan. You're not just running for Congress. Michigan has a very contentious election coming up in 2018 for governor, for AG, for Secretary of State. I'm not asking you to name any candidates, but in particular for the governor's race, I mean, unless you're comfortable doing so, but in particular for the governor's race, what do you feel are important issues for the state of Michigan that you would like to see candidates for governor address for 2018? Thank you.
Good question. I mean, I'm not going to share what I'm going to vote for, quite frankly, because I truly haven't made up my mind yet. I'm still researching and doing my homework on all the candidates. I do feel that, from the last election, so much has changed. And a lot of it has been for the good. I do feel that we've had folks in Lansing truly understand how important it was to get our economy running again. And they were smart enough to understand how necessary it was to bring new business in, and it's very, very hard to do. I mean, Michigan is still, if you're an outsider, and I've worked with so many folks bringing them into Detroit in Michigan, if you're an outsider, there's still this perception that Michigan is a one-pony town, you know, and like, an example of that is like, you know, we had a real shot at Amazon coming to Michigan, and quite frankly, I think that Amazon did their homework, and at the end of the day, I think that they did see the lack of kids who are truly knocking it out in schools, and I think that it scared them a bit. But I'd like to see someone who truly understands the limitations we have as a state relative to what we do best, and that still is very directly tied into the automotive space, and yet how important it is that we start to think about how we can truly broaden our understanding of bringing in new companies, new lines of business, relative to the resources that we have in Michigan. And that's very, very hard to do. We have some great families who've been dedicated to bringing their companies here, the Illich family, the Gilbert family. We've had so many new investors come into our state, buy up the real estate, and that's really all great news. But I still feel that we need to ensure that Flint, you know, never happens again. I mean, that was a disaster, and you know, we forget. I mean, what happened with Flint was because GM decided to move their plant out of that city, and so we have to look at our history and make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes that have happened, and we have to make sure that we have someone who is smart, who has business acumen, who is open-minded, and who is willing to work with everyone in Lansing and everyone on a local level. We need someone who truly is committed to building real relationships, having real conversations. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Something that I'd like to add is that Michigan has an awesome talent pool of engineers with the automotive industry, tool and die people who are just itching to get back to work and being called back to work finally. I think just as a bug, for whoever ends up becoming, you know, in leadership in Michigan, I would really love to see aerospace engineering come into Michigan. I think that we have everything that the aerospace engineering community needs as far as good climates and, you know, not have to work through hurricanes. And Michigan should be opening its arms to the aerospace industry and trying to get that here. And I think Michigan now being a right to work state might actually be an enticement for them to come here.
I have a question, Mr. Watts. So I graduated from Livonia Public Schools, millennial. Growing up, we were almost taught that trade skill jobs are almost beneath us. Growing up, I was taught that the only way you can succeed in life is by being a doctor, by being a dentist, by being a lawyer, etc. We have this huge gap now of people retiring from these trade skill jobs, plumbers, electricians, a lot of great career paths that can make a lot of great money and sustain a great living. Do you have any goals or ideas to help motivate my generation coming into the workforce and the generations behind me to get more interested in trade skill jobs? Because these vacancies have to be filled. And we need mechanics, we need people that can come to our house and charge us $300 to install a faucet.
No, we don't need that.
I mean, if I had to do it again, I would become a plumber.
Yeah.
So I actually have a music degree. I went to Northwestern University and I majored in music. And I had a mentor once And she was like, Kristine, what are you doing getting a music degree? Like, get a nurse degree or something. You're gonna have to always support yourself. And she was right. I've been supporting myself since I was 18, but to your point, I absolutely support trade. I mean, seriously, if I had to do it again, I would have done that differently because, again, this is one of the challenges in Michigan is, it is still so directly tied to automotive, and unless you really find a niche, it's very hard to keep climbing that ladder. And I think that there is, again, it comes with an awareness play. It's almost understanding and hearing from someone that you respect, that you feel is a mentor, to let you know it's okay. Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to go for a 4-year degree, and that's another very serious area that we need to rectify in terms of the government needs to get out of loaning all this money for education because it's not going to get paid back and it keeps us more in debt. And I think there's a lot to be said for, again, a wonderful person, my father said, Kristine, do what you love and everything else follows. And there's truth to that. I've taken jobs that, are hourly jobs, and I've absolutely loved them. I mean, it's again, and it does go back to making sure you're making the right choices. And there have been times in my life I've had to make some really hard decisions because I wasn't sure I'd be able to support a family or support having kids. And so, as a young adult, it can be very, very hard to make these kinds of decisions, but at the end of the day, learning never stops. You're never too old to learn something new, and you have to be smart about it, and again, it comes back to that your own fiscal responsibility and what's most important to you.
Again, this is more of a statement than a question. It's really, I don't think it's trying to teach our kids that skilled trades is an option for them. It's teaching the parents that are making their kids go to college that skilled trades is an option. A perfect example of that, and even our community leaders here in the city of Livonia, we just approved a $190 million bond to build 3 auditoriums, one for each of our high schools. And we didn't put 1 penny into our career training center. So it's up to us, the community, to let our elected officials know that, I don't think there's a lack of thespians in the world that we need to train up people to work lights and stuff. I don't understand where we don't invest. There's not a person or a politician in the country that's not talking about the fact that we need skilled trades, yet we don't invest in our skilled trades. We talk about it because it sounds good, but we don't do it. And myself, I've been in the heating and air conditioning industry and skilled tradesman for 34 years, and it's been wonderful.
I just have one more question. What's your views on the voucher system?
The school voucher program, well, I do feel that we need to have more choices relative to schools. I think that we need to, again, I think the power needs to be removed from federal, give it to the state, local levels, and I think that being able to create educational savings accounts is a great idea. I think that it's working in some states in terms of being able to choose what school you can go to. It's a very old system to have to go to schools where you live. The brick and mortar, this is a school that's available to us because we live, in this district. And I think, again, it's taking back what is rightfully ours, and that is, I think parents need to play a bigger role. If they want to homeschool their kids, we need to support them to be able to do that. I think that we should all have the option to get out of ESSA and choose what schools are going to be the best for our children. And there's also 6 states that are participating in a program, again, that allows families to receive, state money private, so it's literally like a debit card that only the parents have control over, that can be used to educate their children. And I think that is really the best path forward in order to ensure that we're defining what is best for our kids relative to their education.
Any other questions for Kristine? Okay, well, Kristine, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Brian, would you like to speak? Brian is a candidate for state representative here in Livonia.
Yeah, let's give it up for Kristine one more time. Come on. Who says Republicans aren't fired up for this election? Look at this miserable day, and we're out here listening to our candidates to get educated, better educated. Thank you, Kristine. Well, a lot has happened since we've last convened. April 24th was the filing deadline, and we have very good news at the Meekin campaign. We are through the primary and on to the general election. That does not mean we're not going to run a primary campaign. We are. We're going to work just like we are in the primary election. We're going to work hard. We're going to put signs out. We're doing doors already, raising money, doing a lot of fundraising. So we're really excited about this campaign, and it starts today and tomorrow and then the next day. We're going to be working hard all the way through November. But we need your help. We need everyone's help. We'll be having some local events here pretty soon to start gathering local workers and putting people to work across the city. Since this is just one city is the district. I'm really excited about this and looking forward to the campaign. Thank you very much.
A couple of quick announcements here. The next meeting of the Livonia Republican Club will take place on Saturday, June 9th at 11 a.m. The guest speaker will be Carrie Bentivolio, former congressman and who's running for Congress again this year, as well as Stan Grott, who is the Shelby Township Clerk and another candidate for Secretary of State. After the June 9th meeting, we have a very special lineup of 6 special events we're calling our Summer Night Forums. They are Tuesday, June 12th, with a speaker to be announced. Thursday, June 28th, a redistricting referendum. We are still working on the 2 camps from each side of pro redistricting reform, which is voters, not politicians, and another individual who is going to be speaking against it on Thursday, June 28th. Tuesday, July 10th, we are another tentative speaker, bigger name, former statewide politician. We're working on just to confirm with her schedule before we announce her. Then on Thursday, July 26th, we have confirmed we're going to be having a debate on the marijuana legalization referendum here between Scott Greenlee and Josh Hovey. Scott Greenlee will be on the anti-legalization side, and Josh Hovey will be on the pro-legalization side. Tuesday, August 14th, we have scheduled tentatively Dave Trott. It looks like he will be able to make it, but before we start promoting it too much, we're going to hold back on final confirmation from his schedulers. And then on Thursday, August 23rd, we're going to hold a local issues forum. We're going to be inviting the mayor of Livonia, the township supervisors of Canton, Plymouth, and Northville to speak on local issues. This will all start at 7 o'clock in the evening right here. And we will begin pushing this out very soon once we have these final confirmation from these guest speakers. Before we adjourn today, is there anything anyone else would like to bring to the floor? Any comments, concerns, issues? Ken?
Go
ahead.
No, I'm excited to announce Senator Colbeck has asked me to chair a fundraiser for him. And we are going to hold an event here next Saturday, 7 o'clock p.m. And David Barton from Wall Builders is coming in to be our speaker. He's a strong supporter of Senator Colbeck and his campaign for governor. And we're looking to put 300 people in here and have a fun time listening to I keep wanting to say Dr. Barton, but David Barton explained the founding of this country and some of the beliefs of the founders of this country. So it'll be a very historical opportunity to learn how this country was formed. And we'll have light refreshments. It starts at 7 o'clock. You can register. It is a fundraiser. You can register at www.colbeckforgovernor.com/Barton, B-A-R-T-O-N, Livonia. And that's Colbeck for Governor, F-O-R. Thanks.
Get water?
The Michigan Republican Party, MRP, they are going to be here today at 1:30.
1:30.
And Joe Weaver, he's the regional director, field director for this area. So at 1:30, Michigan Republican Party will be here, going to be working on things in regards to knocking doors and getting active. So if you want to wait, come back at 1:30. Joe Weaver asked me to share that with you. 1:30, Michigan Republican Party will be here. And the way we make Republicans win, like Councilman Mika winning in the state rep race, and Mrs. Bonds winning her race, you have to get active, you have to come out and volunteer. Too often we sit on the sidelines and complain.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want.
Democrats are elected. Well, this is your opportunity to get out, come get active, come learn from the Michigan Republican Party, and help good conservatives win in August and also November.
All right, thanks, everyone.